Hey everybody, we're back to go ahead and kind of finish up on this S4 active. We're going to go ahead and show you how to reattach the LCD to the mid-frame of the phone. I have a couple different 3M double-sided tapes here. I have a 1mm and then a 2mm width of tape, which I'll be using on this phone. And also helping to try to retain its water resistant capability, I'll be using some silicone glue. You can see that the power button and volume buttons are attached to the mid-frame of the phone. You want to make sure that you clean up all of the remaining residue on the phone, so making sure that everything is removed, all the tape residue around the sides, the bottom down here as well. Everything's been pulled out and scraped clean, so when you put the new tape on, you won't have any ridges or deforming of portions of the screen. So it's taking something sharp, a pin or a pick or something to go ahead and clean out everything off of this. I'm going to go ahead and put our back menu and home button. You can see where it fits right into the spot right here. Make sure that you put that on before you start to tape down the LCD. And then we're going to use this silicone Loctite glue to help try to retain the sill around the edges of the phone. See if we can't get the water resistant capability to stay in this phone here as well. So just using the tape and a pair of scissors, go ahead and cut the length in which you need. We're going to run it down the sides of the phone here. Making sure that it fits in properly down the side of the mid-frame of the phone. And cutting it to fit the correct length. And I like to use my dental pick here to go ahead and just push the tape down and make sure it's sealed all the way across. Then we'll go ahead and do the same on the other side of the phone. Just using the pick to go ahead and push it down and making sure that it's nice and adhered to the mid-frame. Now you don't have to have 1mm tape for this. You can just use a 2mm and cut it in half and use that as well. I just think it's a little bit more convenient just to use this thinner tape here. Also, if you have the original tape portion that comes with the new LCD, you can use that as well. Let's go ahead and tape across the top of where the home button, menu, and back button will sit, making sure we get a nice solid seal on the interior portion of the phone. Make sure I cut it to the proper length so I don't get any overlap. Use a little bit wider tape here. Get a little bit more surface area. We'll put it right down here in the corner. Just cut it to fit the correct curvature of the phone down here at the bottom. We'll go ahead and do the same on the other side of the phone. Making sure that we cut it to fit the circular or the round pattern at the bottom to make sure that we get a nice tight seal. Seems like the corners are always the trickiest parts to get to stick down on a phone. Just make sure using my dental pick that we get it nice and pushed out. There's no tape overlap. Just working to make sure that there is no gaps in the tape as well. If we're trying to retain that water resistance, we need to make sure that no water can leak through on the sides of the phone. Use a little bit thinner tape on the spotter portion. You can see that where the home button, back button, menu button go, there's kind of a raised edge where the button sits into. You definitely don't want your tape to overlap on top of this, as when you start to try to press your buttons, it'll probably start to stick and you'll get not the right response or feeling like you would if you were working with a brand new phone. So making sure that no tape goes over that lapping or that raised edge. So we'll use the 1mm width tape to help us kind of keep it on the interior side of that. This part's a little bit tricky, as you have to get to match the curve of the bottom of the phone to get a nice tight seal. Make sure you cut it to the proper fit so the tape doesn't overlap again. There's a little gap down here at the bottom. I'm just going to try to fill in since I cut the tape a little too short. We can go ahead and work on the top portion of the phone. The goal here is to make sure you don't cover up any of the sensor holes or the front-facing camera. You want to make sure you cut everything to the opening fit. Same thing goes here. We do have to cut the tape a little bit to fit the curve of the top edge of the phone. Try to use a razor blade to cut this to fit the top. This is a little dull, unfortunately, it looks like. Making sure we cut all the tape out so it doesn't overlap. Or stick when we put the new glass in, we don't want it to hang up on the top there. Do the same to cut the corner for the next side. The phone kind of has a beveled edge, so cutting it to fit is a little bit tricky in this corner. Try this razor blade again with a little bit of pressure holding the tape down, see if that'll help me out. And it does not. I'll have to recut the tape again. Make sure you cut it so it doesn't overlap any of the holes up here at the top, especially the front-facing camera. Put some of the thinner tape below the earpiece. I'm going to make sure that it's sealed up on all edges so no water can leak through. Try to retain that water resistance. You can see that there's a place where there's no white backing on the tape that's in the corner there. There is tape down there. Just the white backing came off. Alright, go ahead and start removing all the backing off the tape. Making sure that if it does ripple that you flatten it back out so there's no high points in the tape on the phone. There's a little gap here that I'm going to try to fill in. If you can get the back off that little tiny piece of tape. It's a little bit tricky. Alright, we have all of our tape applied. The next thing that we're going to do is use the glue and try to disperse it onto the mid-frame of the phone. This Lactop Go-To glue, it's more of a silicone glue. It does take a little bit of time to set up, about 30 minutes. So we will end up clamping this phone together, and I'll show you how I did that to make sure it sets up and gets a nice tight seal on the phone. Just putting a glob onto a surface, and then we're going to use this dental pick to help kind of place it out on top of the mid-frame. We don't want it to be extremely thick. We just want to make sure we get a nice tight seal all the way around the phone, almost like painting it onto to a degree. But making sure we don't get any of it anywhere we don't want. So we don't want anything on these actual buttons, the pads below. And again, this is just really trying to retain that water resistance. This glue does take about 30 minutes to set up, and it takes about a full 24 hours to cure. So we want to make sure that we lock this phone down, clamp it nice and tight, all the way until the cure point. If we just get a nice good seal on the exterior portion of the phone, that should give us our watertight seal. Alright, it's looking pretty good. Just going to double check and make sure I got all the corners in. Just going around to make sure that it's nice and even all the way around the mid frame of the phone. Almost forgot to put my home menu and back button in. That was a close call. Make sure you do slide that in first before you put this back together. Make sure that the ribbon cable goes through the mid frame of the phone and into the back portion where it's supposed to fit in. We're just going to go ahead and press down on this phone exterior. Make sure that it gets nice and snug. There's no high points in the frame. You'll see glue coming out of the sides, and that's completely fine. Just go ahead and remove it. Just rub it off a little bit. Then what we're going to use, we have some smaller C-clamps that we're going to use to kind of clamp this phone together. Just making sure we're not damaging anything on the back side of it. And let's give it a pretty good seal. When I get it close to the edge of the phone, we don't want to put it down extremely tight, just to enough to where it holds the phone. Now really 6 clamps would be ideal for this. I think one on each corner and then one down the sides of the phone would be perfect. Unfortunately, I can only find 4. So just going around and making sure that I press down on everything and it's nice and tight. Make sure there's no glue that's on top of the sensor ports of the phone. Making sure that the sides of the phone are nice and tight. And always check the clamps, move them around a little bit. I've used this technique on a couple other phones and it worked well. Just press it down and make sure I clean it up a little bit if we need to, if there's a lot of excess glue coming out of it. Alright, we'll go ahead and let's let it cure for 24 hours. Alright, we're back to go ahead and remove this. You can see that I found 2 additional clamps, and so I kind of clamped it in the corners, the top. So if you do have that, the ideal layout would be 1 in each corner, then 1 down the sides of the phone. Let's go ahead and remove these clamps, and we'll see how our LCD looks. Make sure it's nice and snug onto the mid frame of the phone. Make sure there's no excess glue that's kind of leaked out the sides. We'll check the back side as well. Yes, it looks great. There's no high points down the sides of the phone. Everything seems nice and snug. The ribbon cable is perfect and nice and intact. I would say this will have a great seal on the sides of the phone. Now, if I do get a chance, I'll try to put this phone together and check the water resistance. I may not have the ability to do so, as I definitely don't want to ruin the motherboard, because I'll be trying to resell this phone. But if I do come across it, I'll post that video. I hope you found this helpful. We'll be doing the reassembly video. You can click that in the bottom right hand corner. That'll move you into the next series within this repair video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.